everybody, it's Chad with Nobody Else's Auto with a 7 o'clock Sunday, and we will get rolling here shortly. All right, we've got a few people starting to jump on with us. As always, thanks for coming back, everybody. Appreciate you swinging by, spending a little time out of your Sunday evening with me and all of us in the group that we've got hanging out on here every Sunday night. Last week we did have some members on YouTube. As always, I can't recognize them, not gonna recognize them. That's what they're trying to get me to do. If you guys want to help run them out, I'm sure not going to be opposed to that. But that's the only way to keep them under control. But I'm not going to recognize them because that's what they're trying to get me to do. Chris from Ohio's on. Glenn from Minnesota's on. Glenn's back as usual. Glad you guys made it. Nothing popping up on YouTube as of yet, comment-wise. So we'll see if we get something rolling there. Make sure we don't have any connection issues on YouTube. Speaking of connection issues, last week, obviously, Facebook was a disaster, to say the least. Tons of connection issues on Facebook. YouTube seemed to roll pretty smoothly, but Facebook, we had a lot of issues. In fact, I talked to Rico, our buddy Rico, after we got done, and he had them both up, and he said at times Facebook was almost 40 seconds behind YouTube on the feed. So if we have that issue again tonight, we've got some comments popping up on Facebook. Jerry from New Mexico's here. Scott from Iowa's here. So maybe we are working. Lee from New York's on YouTube issue again, as just like a lot of you guys did last week. Some of our viewers made the suggestion. You can watch on YouTube even if you don't have an account. Just punch up YouTube, punch up Nobody's Show, and it'll bring it up and you can watch, and you can still comment on Facebook, and I'll get those over here on the other computer. So Tim from Canada's on. James from Texas is on. Rico and Jess are back with us. Thanks for being here, everybody. So like I said, if we've got feed issues on Facebook again tonight, please just jump over to YouTube. I'll keep an eye over here for the comments. Like as always, I've got both computers up and I'll try to keep up with comments on both formats. So Stephen from Vermont's on with us, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed that the system's going to work. It's amazing what we've got for technology that we can sit here on Sunday night and hang out together and talk old cars. But sometimes it just doesn't cooperate with us extremely well. So Don from Nashville, Mick's here, Old School's on with us. Glad you guys made it on YouTube. And like I said, as always, I'm on both formats. So I've got a computer here and a computer here, trying to keep up with comments on both of them. If I miss you, it was not intentional. It was just either it scrolled too quick or the system didn't feed me, because we do run into some of that. Dan from Defiance is back on with us. Glad you made it, Dan. And that's kind of what we've got going for tonight. So let's get rolling into tonight's chat. David W. is back on with us. My good buddy Mike is on. And lots of things happening in the industry this week. Obviously, Meekum wrapped up Glendale last week. We rolled straight into Barrett-Jackson on Tuesday, I believe it was. They got started at Barrett, and didn't have time to watch a lot of it on TV. In fact, I didn't watch any of it on TV. I did look through some of the results. I watched a little bit of it last night on the computer, and after scanning back through the results, I think it's safe to say the market's still hanging in there. Chris just jumped on with us on YouTube. Dan from St. Louis is on, but the results were strong all the way around. I looked at a lot of the automobilia, since we talk about automobilia on here as well as cars and trucks. Overall, automobilia looked pretty solid. And it's an auction. There's always going to be some stuff that just makes you shake your head and wonder why. And there's always some stuff you're going to wonder why it didn't bring more. But overall, it looked pretty good. Tim's with us on YouTube because he's in Facebook jail. So wonder what Tim did wrong. But I'm sure it probably wasn't anything that important, but somebody didn't like it. So I'm glad you made it. But Rick from North Carolina made it on Facebook too. So. But overall, everything looked really solid. Of course, they've got big charity cars that they do every year. They had the first electric Hummer, sold for $2.5 million. Of course, it was a charity. The VIN number 1 Bronco sold for $1 million for a charity for Ford. So, there's always interesting things like that happen at Barrett-Jackson. Randy's on with us on Facebook. Glad you made it, Randy. But there's always cool stuff there. There's always interesting stuff there besides the charity cars. Obviously, the big news, the Shelby Cobra Super, Rod Mad's on. The Scott's on with us. Glad you made it back, Scott. But obviously, the Shelby Cobra Super Snake, the only one in existence. They built two of them. They were a supercharged 427 and twin supercharged 427, actually. The car's been through Barrett before, and they did run it again last night. It did sell last night for hammered at $5 million. So with fees and everything, you're looking at $5.5 million. So a little bit under, I believe, Carroll's personal Shelby Cobra, and if I remember correctly, in Kissimmee, I think did 5.4 plus fees. So not if I remember correctly, so just a hair under that. Obviously, still big money, but for one car. But when you compare it against some of the Ferraris and things like that, and what they're bringing to buy a one-of-one type car that has the provenance that these cars have, and anybody that knows the story, if you remember, they did build two of the Super Snakes. One was for Bill Cosby, one Carroll Shelby kept. The car that Bill Cosby got, he took it back. It scared him. And I don't remember if they took it apart or what had happened, but the second car did not survive. So this is the only Shelby Super Snake in existence. So when you take that into consideration, it's an iconic car, and you compare that to what some of the Ferraris bring at 10 and 20 million, obviously out of my league, but maybe for some of those guys that may have been a pretty good buy. I don't know. Some of these cars that we look at, we covet, we lust after, we admire, they do tell a story. And when you have a car like that tells that kind of a story, on top of the fact that they are essentially art, what is a fair value. So just interesting to see that stuff. Don't know who bought it for sure. My buddy Jim Wicks is actually who I heard bought it on TV, but I'm sure he was representing a client of his for the car that he had. I'm sure he bought it for somebody else. If you've caught the videos I've done with Jim, that's essentially what he does. He is a professional buyer. And he actually did buy that car last night. He goes to Mecum, Barrett, all the GAA, all those big auctions, and he looks cars over for his customers and says, yes, it's a good car. No, you should probably stay away from this. Yes, the car's correct. No, the car's not correct. And he can handle a transaction for him. So it's, kind of interesting to find, that he bought that car and see what we find out later. My good buddy Bill Twitchell just jumped on with us. Glad you made it tonight, Bill. But it was cool to see what the car did. I don't remember what it brought last time I went through Barrett Jackson, but $4 million is what sticks in my head. But I'm just shooting from the hip on that. But a lot of other cool stuff went through. Obviously, there were hundreds and hundreds of cars there to look at. They had a couple of interesting Fords that were actually part of the Ford family. 58 Edsel station wagon and a 47 Ford Woody. That both did extremely well. The 47 Ford Woody was resto modded with a late model drivetrain, bought a couple $100,000, and the Edsel station wagon brought 150,000 plus fees. So that was kind of interesting to see those vehicles run through as well, and see what they did overall. There's something else that was kind of interesting that did go through. The first production 55 Thunderbird actually was sold. The first production one. There were prototypes, so there were test cars, but the number one production 55 Thunderbird offered to the public sold last night for $374,000 as well. Old School says the first real supercar was a Shelby Cobra. Yeah, that was, and there's a lot of truth to that statement. There were a lot of performance cars, there were a lot of sports cars, but it's to put big cubic inches and crazy horsepower into a sports car. That's pretty much where the Cobra was at. So skim the results. You can go to barrettjackson.com and look it all up. But overall, after I looked through a lot of it, some things did surprise me. Corvettes were actually back up a little bit from what I saw, especially for some of the C1 solid axle cars. 50s cars seemed a little stronger than they've been over the last few years, which kind of surprised me. And not just necessarily the resto mods. Obviously, the resto mods have been doing well anyway. Street rods were kind of all over the board. I saw some street rods that did really well. And then as we've been seeing kind of across the board, street rods have been slipping a little bit in value wise. So they were kind of bouncing around in different places, but overall everything looked pretty solid. One thing that did kind of surprise me, there were a few Camaros that surprised me at what they didn't bring. There was and there again, there could be discrepancies with the cars. You don't know this, just by what you read on the internet, but they sold a 69 Copo Camaro 427 car for like 150,000 total, fees and everything was like 150. That seems a little soft for some of those cars. So, old school, what 60s or 70s muscle cars a bargain these days? Really old school on that. I see them all slipping a little bit, honestly, just because that generation is starting to get a little older, and I don't feel that the demand is going to be as strong. Obviously they're great cars. I don't ever really see the bottom falling out of them. But I have seen them plateau. I've seen a lot of the higher dollar stuff, just like this Camaro we were talking about, where they've seemed to kind of back off a little bit. We've seen it in the Hemi cars for sure. Hemi E-bodies, where 10 years ago, anything that was a Cougar or Challenger that was a Hemi car was 250 on up. And it's not uncommon to see those cars in the 150, 200 range. I've even seen some of them sell a little less than that. So and then that's right, old school. That's exactly what it is. The baby boomers are getting older. They either have the cars or have had the cars or are not as determined to get them back. So that's kind of what we're seeing. Is there a bargain? There's not really any bargains because there's just so hard to find. But I see and I feel that the values have plateaued on a lot of it, with the exception of the one-off cars and things like that, that were just a few of them ever made, or a prototype or a factory race car. We're still seeing that stuff commanding crazy dollars, just like 5R002, the prototype GT350R race car. Obviously, the Super Snake Cobra, which there's one of one. Carroll Shelby's personal 427 Cobra, they sold at Kissimmee, which was one of one. Those type of cars are still commanding crazy money. Your average, you say average, they're still great cars, but your more base cars seem to have plateaued. And, some of this stuff that I'm seeing is, there's demand, but there's also a lot of cars out there to buy. There's a lot of them changing hands. So my buddy Mike Strauss, he's got a Bonneville convertible for sale. Cheap, or trade for two mother-in-laws. So, and he did actually pick up a pretty sweet Bonneville convertible. So, let's see. Doug's on with us. Old school. A lot of these muscle cars will end up in collections worldwide, and that is true. That's something else to think about. That some of this stuff, more and more of this stuff, is getting dispersed around the globe, whether we like it or not. It is an international market. And a lot of those cars are getting into different collections. We got Craig with us on YouTube as well. So that's something else that we're starting to see, and that always, varies on exchange rates and things like that. But like I said, as some of these cars plateau in value, and then the other thing about it, and just like we talked about on baby boomers, a lot of these cars, they want them to be able to drive them. They want to be able to take them to Dairy Queen. They want to take them to the cruise night. Some of these cars that we've always admired over the years are not that great to do that with. You look at the 69 Z28 Camaros, they were all 4-speeds. They were a high lift cam. They were designed for high RPM, not putting up and down Main Street or going to Dairy Queen. The AAR Cudas, the TA Challengers, those were high RPM cars that were designed to run at high RPMs, and they're not that comfortable to drive around town. So you see that affecting the market on a lot of this stuff. And we've started to see some of that in the value of the Z28s, as well as the TAs and AARs, because there's still a big demand for those cars, but a lot of these people want to be able to drive them and enjoy them. And some of those cars were never designed to be driven on the street comfortably. So got Bruce on with us. Bruce got his international parts. Glad they all made it safely, Bruce. Thanks for giving me a shout. Glad all that stuff's going to work out well for you. Yeah, Doug, if you've got some questions, you can give me a shout on that build we did on that cab over. I can tell you what I know about it. Obviously, my buddy Mike Shook at Auto Artistry is the one that actually did it. So he would know more of the details about it. But yeah, I mean, anytime, yeah, I have no problem if you got some questions about that as well. So that's what I'm starting to see happen in a lot of this, in a lot of that market. So, but like I said, overall the numbers are still strong. Obviously, Meekum has had some strong sales, and obviously Barrett had a great sale. So I don't see, our market is still moving forward. It's still strong. There's still a lot of people that even more so now want to get out and do some stuff with their cars. So anyway, that's kind of what I had, picked up from what I had seen and what I had studied on Barrett last weekend. What else is going on? Yesterday, we went to Kansas City for a couple of days. We did go to the World of Wheels show at Bartle Hall in Kansas City. Had a great time there. They had a lot of cool stuff there. One thing that seems to be more and more of every year at World of Wheels, because we do typically try to make that show, is a lot of lowriders. And it seems like more and more lowriders every year. Yeah, you bet, Dan, or Doug, excuse me. Yeah, he's got a 40 also. So yeah, give me a shout. I'll let you know what I know. And like I said, maybe you can talk to my buddy Mike at Auto Artistry, since he's the one that actually did it, knows more about it. But the lowrider crowd and the lowriders at the show at World of Wheels in Kansas City was really cool. I was really surprised that, there's a lot of them I've seen there every year. But there's more and more every year. Jose from Miami's on. Glad you made it. But I tell you what, the quality of those cars gets better all the time. I'm not a fan of that genre. It's not my thing. But there's some really cool cars, and those guys are just as passionate as the muscle car guys, as the pickup guys, and they turn out some really cool stuff. So I was really impressed. Every year there's more and more of them, and the quality of those builds, even though it's a different style, it's still amazing what a lot of those guys do. Yeah, that's what Scott said. He loved the lowriders too. Those guys, they like I said, they have the same passion as the guys with the pickups, the same passion as the guys with the muscle cars, and the same passion as the guys with the sports cars and everything else. And that's right. And like Scott said, they're typically spotless, because those guys love those cars just like we do. So was really impressed with the selection of that. And that Old School chimed in exactly the same. He appreciates the lowrider scene, even though it's not what he's into. And, and I've seen them there every year, and that's where I see the most of them that I see, because there's not a lot of them here in Great Bend, Kansas, where I'm at. But every year there's more and more, and they're better and better, and it's a whole nother genre of the collector car world, and they do an amazing job with them. So it's pretty cool, and that's exactly the same with Doug. He can appreciate them, but he doesn't love them, and that's also the beauty of this hobby, because you can go to a cruise night, park next to a lowrider and a muscle car and a pickup truck, and everybody can have fun and hang out and appreciate what everybody else does. And like Mick says, lowriders are helping to keep the hobby alive too, just like all of us. So that's it's an important scene, and it's really cool seeing what some of those guys have done and what they continue to do. So that was one thing that did stand out to me, and that I see more and more of all the time, every year that we go there. One thing that did surprise me this year, Old School, they love them in Mexico. And that's right. I think Doug just summed it up the best on YouTube. When you're a car guy, you're a car guy, and that's it. We all love our stuff, even though if it's a different genre, different style, but we can all appreciate the work, the time, the effort, and the passion that goes into these things. Corky from Illinois, Kevin's on with us. Yeah, Vanderbrink does have a Pontiac collection with a lot of Firebirds coming up in Tonganoxie, which is in northeast Kansas. Have not looked at any of that stuff yet. I don't know what they've got, or haven't paid that much of attention to it, but I did see it. Am I into the VW bus scene? I don't know much about them. I don't have any split window stuff. I've never owned any split window stuff. I've got one bay window bus here and one Vanagon here is all I've got, but I don't really know much about the early stuff at all. Never been around it, never owned any of them. So that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse on that stuff. So the one thing that did surprise me at World of Wheels this year, and once again, definitely not one of my things, and something I probably understand even less than lowriders, was all of the late model pickups. There was a bunch of, and I'm talking late model like 2010 and newer, like 2010 to 2020, lifted with tires and wheels that stuck, a foot out the side of each truck, or out the side of the truck. That's something I just don't understand, because I love my big trucks. I love my Cummins, Dodges, and I love them to be clean and spotless and just the way they're supposed to be. But they are still work trucks. I keep them inside. I try to keep them up, and I try to keep them nice, but they got to be able to work. And some of the stuff you couldn't even work. You couldn't even use them to work. Mr. Orange is missing his Carmen Ghia, and that's another interesting VW where the Carmen Ghia is. So, but all of the late model pickups, and like I said, I understand it's a different genre, it's a different thing, but going to World of Wheels to walk around and see, I bet there was 2010 to 2020, primarily Dodges and Fords, a few Chevys that were, lifted with air ride and things like that. So to me, that kind of took away from it a little bit, because that's, it's a different genre to the point where it's basically new vehicles you put tires and wheels on. And I understand there's a big following for that stuff, but that was a little bit different for me to see that amount of volume of brand new pickups at a car show like that. Kind of on pickups, a little bit different. GMC Cyclones, the Cyclones and the Typhoons from the early 90s with the turbo V6s in them. Those were great trucks too. But this stuff was, like I said, basically 2010 to 2020 model trucks, and there were quite a few of them there based on the percentage of vehicles that they had. But there were a lot of really cool stuff there. There was a lot of stuff that stood out that was completely different. Tim says in Pittsburgh they seem to have more rat rods at World of Wheels, huh? And that's one thing that did not have a lot of here were rat rods. Like Jason said, most of those 4x4s wouldn't even be able to do anything in the mud. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. Let's see. And it is a new era, Kevin. I understand that. I just, essentially most of these were brand new pickups or a few years old. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure I don't want to miss anybody. Red Cuda. I don't remember if there's a Red Cuda at World of Wheels old school or not. So, let's see. But some of the cool stuff that did stand out at World of Wheels this year, and I've got a bunch of pictures I'll be putting up on the Nobody Show page on Facebook. Tim L just jumped on with us on YouTube. Glad you made it. Was the there was a Crosley Hot Shot, which was kind of a little sports car that Crosley made around 1949, 1950. It was pretty neat to see one of those fully restored. Mike Strauss loves his donks. That's right. I can see you rolling in one, buddy. But you live on dirt roads, so I don't think those 26-inch wheels with low profile tires are going to work very well on your dirt roads. But really nice 58 Bonneville two-door hardtop, which obviously I like 58 Pontiac since I've had one that I've had since I was a kid. I took a lot of pictures. What do I think about the Jeep FC 150s? I'm not even sure what the FC 150 Jeep was, unless we're talking about the forward cab ones. This is the only thing that I could be thinking of that, Doug. I'm not 100% sure. Let's see. And there might be some truth, Scott. A lot of the newer trucks are people you just need a good platform to start with, and do something with. And I'm sure there's some truth to that. It just, to me, a truck needs to be able to do something besides just drive around on huge tires and wheels. I need my trucks have to work, even though I like to take care of them. I still need to work. And like Ed says, he upsets people when he tells them he wants to see what you built, not what you bought, if you want to impress. Brian jumped on with us on Facebook as well. Comments are scrolling here pretty quick. I may have missed a few here. Oh, yeah. Jess loved their Crosley as well. But a lot of cool stuff there, and had a great time. They had the pinstripe auction for charity, which they do every year. We bought a couple of pieces of pinstripe artwork from their pinstripers that they have set up there, showing off their craft and their trade, which is extremely, extremely unique. Range Rovers, I don't know a thing about them, Mr. Orange. I've never been in my wheelhouse, never had them, don't know anything about them. Man of Allah's on with us on YouTube. Glad you made it, everybody. So we had a great time at World of Wheels and saw a lot of cool stuff. Just, some things were definitely different this year. They did have a lot of vendors as usual, but not a lot of vendors that had original memorabilia stuff. A lot of t-shirt stuff, a lot of die-cast stuff. So, but like I said, overall, they still had a good shoe. But it had, for considering what we've been up against the last year or so, it went well. They had a good crowd. I think they were down on vehicles a little bit because one entire end of the building, or not entire end of the building, but a large area on one end of the building was still open with no cars in it and no vendors as well. So I think, I think they were down a little bit on cars. I don't know how they were on participation. We were there on Saturday. They seemed to have a pretty steady stream of traffic that of people in there walking around. And people enjoying themselves and actually being able to get out and do some stuff. So that's always fun. At least people could do that again. They can walk around, enjoy themselves, check out the cars, and have a good time, which is why we're here and what we try to do and enjoy our hobby. So at least it happened. And it happened later. It's typically in February, but it did happen. We did get to go. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that that's what continues to happen this year. A lot of the shows, everybody is still a go on. I'm not hearing many cancellations. We've got some swap meets coming up. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that that's the way things keep rolling. A little bit more exciting news here local to me as the SRCA drag strip. We talk about them on here quite a bit. Obviously, I'm involved with them. And we've had a big announcement this week that Race Motive is going to be coming here. That's right, Andrew. Hopefully Lawrence Swap Meet doesn't have a low turnout after taking a year off. But I think everybody just wants to get out and do some things and make them happen. So that's what we're going to try to get. That's what I'm hoping, that just being a year off doesn't hurt anything. And I think it's going to help things, really. I think everybody just wants to get out. I think the fact that Wichita was forced to cancel because they couldn't get an answer out of Century 2 is going to make, I think everybody's going to go to Arc City and Hutch this year just because of something to do. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you're just like you said, hopefully it does not hurt the turnout. But Race Motive is a company from back east. We do have an event planned here at the SRCA drag strip the first weekend of June for roll racing and half mile racing. Something we've never done here. The track is still coming along as long as there's no huge snafus that we don't get tons of weather where for some reason they can't finish pouring concrete, which they're still rolling and have made great headway. So barring any real weather disaster, we should be in good shape. But type of racing that has never been at the SRCA drag strip before, and a type of racing we really don't see in the Midwest. They're doing a little bit of it in Texas. But one unique thing about us is the length that we've got at the SRCA drag strip and not only do we have the length, because it was a B29 runway, but we also have a racetrack that we can prep, and they want to prep about 2,000 feet of that. So if you're anywhere in the area, you might and you want to check out some really cool stuff, some different stuff that we don't really see in this area very often. With the roll racing, which is getting more and more popular. I've obviously been doing a little research on it since this project started about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. We've been working on it quite a while already, trying to get this thing knocked down or locked down and getting ready to go with it. But it's going to be exciting. And it's obviously just right before Rocky Mountain Race Week. So June's going to be a big, big month at the SRCA drag strip. So if you're anywhere in the area, be sure to see if you've got an open date in June. The first weekend is going to be the Race Motive roll racing and half mile, and looking for some cool stuff, Lamborghinis, Corvettes, Vipers, Porsches, things like that, as well as a lot of other fast street cars, Mustangs, stuff like that. So I from what I've seen, from doing a little bit of research, watching some videos of the events these guys put on, should see a really, really diverse selection of cars for that. And then the following 2 weekends will be Rocky Mountain Race Week starting and ending here at the SRCA drag strip. So please keep that in mind. If you're anywhere in the area, there's going to be a ton of cool stuff going on. Rod says the C10 Nationals is getting close as well. I don't know where those are at, Rod. Where's the C10 Nationals going to be held at this year? So but anyway, that's what we've got for news this week. We'll get into our magazine next, and then we'll do a little trivia, and we'll talk about the raffle and a few other things that are going on. So anyway, this week we're going to look at a copy of Motor Trend from July of 1977. We got Richard Petty on the cover. And obviously, when we get into some of these magazines like Motor Trend, obviously Motor Trend is geared towards late model vehicles for that time. So that's kind of interesting when we see some of the stuff, and looking back, hindsight's 2020, as to what really did or didn't happen with what they were announcing in print at that time. So we'll start flipping through this magazine. We're going to check out a couple of cool articles, and we'll check out some cool ads. There was not a classified section in Motor Trend, so we won't have a classified section tonight. But we're going to start off with one thing kind of interesting. In 1977, at the end of the 1977 model year, Dodge is going to drop the Charger name. Texas Motor Speedway, the C10 Nationals at Texas Motor Speedway. So if you're a Chevy pickup guy and you're in Texas, it might be something worth checking out here coming up. But they dropped the name Charger at the end of 77, and that's when they went to the Magnum name. So that was announced in July of 77. So there again, as we started seeing the shifts, that was just one thing that was kind of cool to see pop up. George just jumped on with us on Facebook. Glad you made it, George. Keep flipping through here and check out what else we've got going on. Something else that was kind of interesting that in today's world really kind of has a little bit of a cult following. And there's a reason I like them, but this was big news in 1977. It was the Volkswagen Rabbit diesel. I'm actually making a small car with a diesel engine. There again, today, very commonplace. In the late 70s, almost unheard of. And these things were really a pretty amazing little engine. When I was a kid, my dad had actually a couple of them at different times of little Volkswagen diesel pickups. And they weren't exact by any means, but they were, at the time, there weren't a lot of little pickups out there. They were handy to run around with. They got crazy mileage. In fact, it has some of the specs on the new Volkswagen Rabbit diesel, and this was a car at the time. Let's see, a few more comments popping up. Jorge wants to start a C10 Chevy project. How much money do you need to start with? That depends entirely on what you want to do with it, Jorge. That's a pretty open-ended question, depending on what direction you want to go and what you want to do. Like Old School says, the Rabbit was a game changer, and it really was. But it was very interesting because they've actually got a spec section on the VW Rabbit diesel. So we'll check out a couple of these specs while we're here looking at it, just to kind of put it into perspective for 1978 numbers compared to today. You got a 12-month, 20,000-mile warranty. Base price was $3,599. Price is tested $4,750. They were 4-cylinder inline diesels, 89.7 cubic inches, and they put out a whopping 48 horsepower. So you weren't going anywhere fast. They'd fly through the quarter mile in 20.7 seconds at 68 miles an hour. So they were no rocket ship by any means. But one thing about those things, and the mileage, the mile per gallon on these things was crazy. They have it reported in here at 44 miles to the gallon. And that's probably pretty close. I remember when we had those little Rabbit pickups with diesels, I remember more than once, I remember a few times, we ran out of fuel because you never had to put fuel in them. You would fill it up and you would just drive it and drive it and drive it and drive it. And literally the point where you forget about putting fuel in it because they were that 45. And I think some of them would get 50 miles to the gallon in certain circumstances. So they really were a game changer, just like Old School said. And something a little bit different, something we don't always talk about on here, something like that. But I always liked them because we had them when I was a kid. But they really were something completely, almost out of nowhere to put a little tiny diesel in a small car for normal transportation back in that time. The next article we're going to check out is going to be, let's see, where are we at here? The Richard Petty article. Great picture of the 43 Charger, big full color picture. And they did actually a full interview with Richard in this magazine. And Old School got 360 miles on 11.3 gallons of fuel in an 88 Civic with a 1.5. Probably the same thing that go forever. You just didn't get there fast. But one thing, this was an interview, a full interview where they actually sat down, and I don't know if you guys can see there where they actually were asking him questions. They had a section where say Motor Trend would ask a question and have his response. And there's several pages of this. There's no way to go through all of it tonight, but there was one thing that really kind of stood out that, and there again, hindsight's 2020. We go back, we're sitting here almost 44 years later, looking at Richard Petty's comments about NASCAR, and then looking at where we're at today. And I thought this was I did go through this article, and one thing that stood out that I thought I'd point out that really, when we look at today, where the car tomorrow, where the only difference is the sticker on them. And it said right in here that Motor Trend says some of the independents in NASCAR have charged that whenever there's a rule change, they get hurt worse. Richard Petty's response at that time in 1977, and remember in 1977, you're still running a stock bodied car. Richard Petty says anytime they make a rule change, it costs everybody. But in the future, we're going to be dictated by what Detroit does. And Detroit is being dictated by the government. Presumably, the small cars will become more of the in thing in NASCAR. But NASCAR is reluctant to make any more changes now because nobody really knows what's going to happen next year. So I found that very interesting when, the drivers and the teams in the late 70s are looking at government mandates, what that is doing to cars and what that's going to do to the bodies of the cars that they are running, because obviously that affects aerodynamics, weight, things like that. And here we are 43 years later, and everybody's running the same thing with a different sticker. So it's kind of ironic how they were worried about where Detroit was going and where the government was going to mandate Detroit to go as to how it was going to affect NASCAR, and now it's basically irrelevant. They just get a different they need a different sticker on the same shell, and away they go. Some comments popping up. Richard Petty Day is coming up, 4-3. I never thought of it that way, Vic, but yeah, you're right. 4-3 would be Richard Petty Day, and it is coming here. Andrew, back when NASCAR was exciting, he was excited to watch the dirt track races in Bristol. But that's true. Yeah, that's back when NASCAR was exciting. Yeah. Like Old School says, Petty was right on with that comment. There's a lot of truth to that, but. Like I said, there's tons of good information in these articles, and we don't have hours and hours to go on and get into all the details. But it just to see that in print today, knowing where we're at now, and to where NASCAR really isn't that exciting, they're the same shape. There are no aerodynamic, advantages or disadvantages. Back then, if you were sponsored by Ford, GM, or Chrysler, and they didn't have a car that was competitive, there wasn't much you could do about it. You still had to work within the parameters of the body. So, but there again, that made it more interesting. It made those guys have to think more, figure that stuff out, and make them work. And not only that, but it also would help dictate changes of the manufacturers to be more competitive, so they could win on Sunday and sell on Monday. And that's obviously it's all gone now. But that's part of what made that era so exciting, even up into the 80s and even into the 90s. late 90s, early 2000s, those cars, you at least still tell what kind of car they were. Like old school says, auto racing is dying a slow death. And there is a little bit of truth to that in certain instances. That's for sure. A modern F1 car sounds like a sewing machine. I don't watch much F1, but yeah, I can see where you can come up with that. But that's what was cool, that racing racing and performance could actually help dictate what happened with the cars we saw on the street, which is pretty neat. And that's, like I said, it's about it. That's exactly right, Mick. The Superbirds, the Daytonas, the Talladega Fords, all that stuff. Those cars hit the streets because of racing. Glenn remembers watching old school racing in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. And there again, we have a lot of cool cars in our hobby because of that. And now with the COT, they're it's like, you got to figure out what size of sticker you need. Not that exciting, not that interesting, and it's my personal opinion, but it seems like in the early 2000s, granted by then everything was a copy, a shell of a car on a race chassis, but they at least still somewhat resembled the car. The lights, the headlights, the taillights, some of that stuff still had to resemble the car. Not by much, and it was definitely, for me, it was waning at that point, but you could still tell that the shape of the car was whether it was a Chevy or a Ford or a Dodge. So, but that's, like I said, that's my personal opinion. I don't watch it at all now, but I do love the history, and I do love to go back and look at the old stuff. So to actually read that in the interview and look at where we're at today, like I said, hindsight's always 20/20, but to read it today and see where we're at today, I was like, wow, it's kind of amazing. So we'll roll on past the Richard Petty article, and we're going to get to another road test because, like I said, this is Motor Trend. They did a lot of newer car stuff. The road test on the new Chevy Chevelle Malibu, which is very interesting. We got a kind of a cool Kawasaki ad there too if you're a bike guy. But the road test on the Chevelle Malibu for 1977, obviously the last year of that body style. And they had some specifications on this car as well. They had the whole specification section, just like we looked at on the Volkswagen Rabbit. Now, what was kind of interesting, Doug, what was the coolest car I've ever had the opportunity to purchase? I don't really know what that would be. I mean, I've moved so many cars over the years that could be. There's nothing that really stands out to me. But I've had a lot of cool stuff over the years. The 41 Willys pickup was super cool. The Cameo I've got right now is super cool. I love all my Trans Ams. I love my Viper. But there again, a lot of those cars are my personal taste because of my experiences and things like that. So, everybody's going to have a difference of opinion on that. I loved my Ferrari when I had my Ferrari. But there again, if you're not a sports car guy, you wouldn't like a Ferrari. But I grew up in the 80s and I watched so much Magnum PI that I thought I had to have one at some point in my life. So, dragging the 39 Ford Deluxe Coupe out of a lean-to, 3 or 4 years ago, stuff like that. There's just so many differences, and it depends on what everybody's opinion is as to what's really cool. So, do you think the oil crisis in 72 was all fake to stop manufacturing muscle cars? I don't think it was fake, but I mean, they were choking them down well before that. I mean, because, you got to remember 1970 was the last year that Ford and GM had high compression engines in 71 in Mopar. So, they were, the government was already choking that stuff down well before the oil crisis in the mid 70s hit. So they were already trying to reel all that in prior to that. How much on a Chevy bed? 47 to 53. There again, Michael, depends on which one you need and what you're wanting and things like that. That's why calling me is so important. So I get all those details because there's a lot of different beds for a 47 to 53 Chevy. So you can go ahead and give me a shout after we get done. My number's on the pages on that on both formats. The one thing that I did notice when I studied the specifications on the road test on the 1977 Chevelle Malibu, this car they tested was a two-door with a 305, You got a 12-month, 12,000 mile warranty. That's what you got at the time. This is a 305 with 145 horsepower, so almost 3 times the horsepower of the 4-cylinder Rabbit diesel we just talked about. But the scary part about it is it wasn't much faster. The Volkswagen Rabbit run a 20-second point something quarter mile, 20.4 seconds or 20.7 seconds. The 77 Malibu only ran a 19.4 at 74 miles an hour. So, as far as like old school just brought up with the oil crunch and the government trying to crack down on performance and fuel economy and things like that, I think that's a pretty good definition of it right there with what we see right in the actual test results of the 1977 V8 Malibu as to how far they had those cars choked down on performance. I'm sure the Rabbit was lighter old school. That's definitely had something to do with it. But it's kind of ironic when you see numbers that close in performance when you get the other side. David took his 98 NSX out of the garage. There's only 8 of them in Quebec. And like Tim says, the Malibu was literally probably twice the size of the Rabbit. And I'm not, the Canadian market's something I'm not extremely familiar with. Obviously, there's a ton of cars up there, but I've never, well, I shouldn't say that. I have been to Canada, but not very much. So I don't know how many cars are up there, if it's a regular thing, if they have big cruise nights or car shows like we do. So that's something that I'm not extremely familiar with as far as how much of that stuff you see. And then, of course, obviously, you had the Mercury pickups. You had, the Pontiacs with Chevy drivetrains, things like that. So Jason, he got a German car magazine from 1956 at an estate sale over the weekend, and it has cool ads for German Fords, but it's all in German, so he can't read it. Old School's in Canada as well, so that's maybe some interesting stuff there too. You guys can help enlighten us on the collector car hobby in Canada. Oh, wow. Glenn, our friend Glenn in Minnesota, says he went to the dealership with his dad to buy a blue 4-door Chevy and came home with a 74-speed Z28 that was a 1-year-old used car. He said his dad was the fastest car in town. So, and there again, that's why we love cars. It brings back those memories. It makes us think about those times, and that's what's so great about it. But a couple other quick articles that I want to catch. And this one I thought was very important. Another comment. David said the mini trail Hondas, those things have gotten crazy in the market too. And there again, I'm not a motorcycle guy. I don't know much about it. I've seen several of them at a lot of the Meekums we've gone to. So I've seen those little Honda mini 50s and 70s and stuff are bringing crazy money. One very interesting article in this July issue of Motor Trend from 1977 was entitled "A Designer's Designer," and this I found very interesting. And there again, we don't have time to read the whole article, but I'm going to point out a couple of things. This is about the retirement of Billy Mitchell, a legendary GM designer, and he was just 65 years old. Got to the age of mandated forced retirement at General Motors at 65. And this was kind of a look back on his career with a lot of the cars he was involved with. Started in the mid 30s with Cadillac and LaSalle. Talks about a lot of the cars he was involved with. And one of his specialties had always been the personal luxury car. The Rivieras, the Tornado, of course, the iconic 63 Riviera, 66 Tornado, 67 Eldorado, 69 Grand Prix, 70 Monte Carlo, the second-gen Firebirds and Camaros, 63 and 68 Corvettes. The guy was an icon in design. David sees my Sun record behind me. No, actually, it's not an Elvis one. It is I think it's Johnny Cash, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look at it again and see, but it's a Johnny Cash one. I've told that story before. We actually got that at Sun Studios. My dad had to go down there for some eye surgery, so I was down there, and we actually got to go through the Sun Studios. Amazing place. I highly recommend it if you're ever in Memphis. You've got to check out the Sun Studios. But this article about Billy Mitchell's retirement and where things were going, and I mean, obviously, if we think back, and obviously a lot of people say the cars in the 70s weren't that great, they didn't like them. The 70s had a lot of great designs, tons of them. And we saw a lot of those carried over into the 80s with, the G bodies, 78 to 87 G bodies, the Riviera, the Eldorado, and the Tornado that came out in 79. A lot of that stuff carried into the 80s. And then we really started to see design start to slip, to where we got into almost cookie cutter type stuff. And there again, as I went through this article getting ready for tonight, there was something in here that stood out that I really thought was interesting and worth bringing up with you guys. And it was Billy Mitchell's greatest frustration after 42 years in design, and literally 42 years spanning 1935 to 1977, the years where some of the most iconic and some of the most beautiful cars that GM ever made were designed and built. I mean, because you got to remember, up until the early 30s, they all pretty much looked the same. And it was the mid 30s when you really started to see different designs, different grills, different fenders, different badging, different ornaments, things like that, different roof lines. And that's where, and Billy Mitchell was right there starting in 35. But when we look at today, and as always, hindsight's 2020, when we got into the 90s and had really a lot of cookie cutter type cars, that's why I found this quote very interesting. Probably Mitchell's greatest frustration in his 42 years in the business has been working with all the people who think they are designers, the managers, the salespeople, the financial people, the engineers, and the product planners. It's the most difficult thing in the world to be a designer, he emphasizes. I wouldn't think of trying to tell them how to write an ad or build a transmission or organize a production line because I'm not trained or experienced in those fields. For the same reason, I think they should keep their noses out of my business. Well, and I think that did happen up until that point, because by the late 80s, we were starting to see a lot of things going directly to exactly what he was talking about, where the bean counters, so to speak, were making a lot of the calls on design, and we saw that a lot. David says AMC Pacers unique, and they are, and I love Pacers because they are unique. But it was very interesting to read that excerpt coming directly from a legendary designer like Billy Mitchell, and then to see what happened with GM as his influence kind of started to fall off several years after his retirement. Bob Lutz. Bob Lutz was Crippled GM. When he was with GM, actually, when he went back to GM, I believe in the early 2000s, Bob Lutz made a lot of changes in GM at that time. 79 Tasman just got on. Was glad you made it. In fact, Bob Lutz wrote a book entitled Car Guys versus Bean Counters that talks about a lot. 2001. Okay, that's when he went back. If you read that book, which I've got it and I have read it, Bob Lutz was actually responsible for bringing some of the design that we see back, some of the design we have seen happen over the last 10 years, and even in what we see in some of the stuff today. Bob Lutz was responsible for bringing a lot of design back and a lot of quality back to GM. And it details a lot of that in that book, Car Guys versus Bean Counters. As far as crippling GM with poor decisions, I don't remember anything specific, but there again, old school, you may have read some stuff different than what I remember. But Car Guys versus Bean Counters is a very good book, and it talks a lot about a lot of the changes. Okay, design, yes, but GM went bankrupt. And I'm still not 100% sure I buy the entire bankruptcy deal as far as why they had to do it. And that's just strictly my personal opinion. And I did follow that, and I can't swear to this. I'll give you a quick rundown on my theory of the bankruptcy of GM and Chrysler in 2009. because they were both in restructuring. GM, yes, GM made a lot of poor decisions to put them in a bad spot. Chrysler was in a bad spot because of the Daimler Chrysler merger, and I don't know how many of you guys remember that. I was there. I was there for day one of the Daimler Chrysler merger. I was in warranty administration. I remember all of that. There's another book which I've read a couple times called "Taken for a Ride" about how Daimler took over Chrysler. As Chrysler had a ton of money in the bank. Basically, Daimler bled a lot of the cash out of Chrysler, and then they dumped it to Cerberus as a management group. They did not disclose a bunch of stuff. There was a huge lawsuit between Cerberus and Daimler about the information that was fed to Cerberus. That's what put Chrysler into a bunch of trouble. Chrysler had billions in the bank before Daimler took them over. Daimler bled the cash off, dumped it to Cerberus, and like I said, did not disclose a bunch of liabilities. And I think there was a bunch of service contract things that Daimler did not disclose, and that's what put Cerberus in a bind, which put the company into bankruptcy, and then it eventually turned into the joint alliance with Fiat. But if you followed that time frame, I'll try to make this short, as I did. You got to remember, bankruptcy is a government-managed restructuring is what they were doing. The government was already involved, and they already had that set up for protection. The way I understand it, and I could be completely wrong, they did not file bankruptcy until the unions quit negotiating with them. And then they filed bankruptcy because that was the only way to break the union contract. So that is my take on it. And there again, I'm gathering bits and pieces from the news, but they basically had to file bankruptcy to get the unions to renegotiate, is how I remember it. But I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I saw, because they were already in restructuring mode, already approved by the government. So not sure if that's correct, but that's what I remember seeing. A couple more comments here. Yeah. David used to work for the Department of National Defense, and they used to have Bombardier Jeeps. I've never seen a Bombardier Jeep. Must be a Canadian thing or something. Not sure. But sounds cool. Jim Petty, I think they closed the Chrysler Museum. Jim, they did close the museum that was at CTC, and it was a great museum. I was there a couple times when I was up there for meetings at CTC, which I guess I should clarify, Chrysler Technology Center in Auburn Hills, when we'd go up for warranty meetings. However, that there is plans to rejuvenate that. Of course, obviously now with the Stellantis merger with Peugeot, who knows what's going to happen. The plans as of a year or two ago, prior to the Stellantis setup, or the Peugeot merger rolling into Stellantis, that's right, 79 Tasman. A lot of money was going to bigwig bonuses. I'm sure that happened too. After the last Viper was produced, they closed Conner Avenue Assembly, and they basically and they sold out all the memorabilia from Conner Avenue. And they gave it all to the United Way of Michigan. They put it on a big online auction. They closed the factory, cleaned it out, sold all the posters and everything off the wall on an online auction, which I bought some of. In fact, we've got this piece right here that actually came from there. And I did a video on this a while back. If you guys haven't seen it, be sure to go check it back out on YouTube. This was probably the last drawing of an AMC car ever made. This is dated October of '94. This is the original watercolor. This is an original design watercolor. They had it on that Conner Avenue Assembly Plant auction. They had a bunch of Viper stuff on there. That's why I was on there. I bought two big black Viper banners that came directly out of Conner Avenue Assembly to hang above my Viper, because my Viper's black. But this was on that auction, and I got it bought too. And you've got to think, and real quick there again, we're kind of getting off subject, but we are talking about design. I guess this is design. When they bought AMC, the Eagle was the only car they were making. And this, as we can see right here, has the Eagle badge in it. They did make the Eagle Vision on the first platform of the LH car. But in '98, when the new LH car came out, there was not an Eagle car. So I'm assuming this being drawn at the end of '94, this was to have been the next generation Eagle car that never made it to production. So this, I mean, maybe this, and you never know. It's always speculation. You always think it's cool, but this could very well be the last design drawing of an AMC car ever made. And like I said, it is the original artist watercolor. So kind of a cool piece. And like I said, I did a full video on it. It's on YouTube. You can also check that out. But supposedly they're going to turn Conner Avenue Assembly into the new museum is where that was headed. Old school like the Eagle Talons. I had one of those for a couple months while I was working in Minnesota, up in Minneapolis, out of the Minneapolis zone office. Those were neat little cars. Jim said, yeah, he liked the museum as well. It was great. Andrew, they did announce the end of the Srt program. That's a hard hit to the performance world. They have ended the program. However, they have not ended the brand. Those designers and engineers got split up into their respective areas. If you were SRT and worked on trucks, you're in the truck area. So it actually diversified that talent. The brand is not going away. The badge is not going away at this point, from what I have read. Yes, they did disband the group, but not the brand. So we'll see. Obviously, when you merge into another big company, who knows what's going to happen. But SRT as a brand is not dead, but the department was broken up to where you got a couple SRT guys in this group, a couple SRT guys in this group. Hopefully, once again, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that continues and those guys continue to handle the performance models for their respective platforms. 79 Tasman. Most Eagles had Mitsubishi engines in them. The Talon was essentially a Mitsubishi Eclipse, I believe. The LH cars, the Eagle Vision was same thing as like a Dodge Intrepid or a Chrysler LHS. They were all Chrysler platform cars. But so that is partially correct that the Talon was essentially a Mitsubishi. But the LH cars were just like it was a rebranded Chrysler there. Again, not really, you've already got the LHS, you've got the Intrepid, you had, the Concorde. So there really wasn't another reason to have another car line. And that's why after, when the new LH was announced in 1998, there was not an Eagle in the platform. And that's what I think this was. I think this was to be the next Eagle car on the new LH platform that never existed. So there again, I got a lot of weird stuff that probably doesn't mean a lot to anybody, but 1994, that's almost 30 years. As crazy as that is to think, that's almost 30 years ago. So cool piece there that I'm pretty excited about. But so hopefully we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled. Hopefully Conner Avenue Assembly will turn into the next Chrysler Museum in hopefully the nearer future rather than the later future. And it could have been a Canadian thing, maybe, that there were more Mitsubishi-powered Eagles. But like I said, I know the Talon was essentially an Eclipse, I think, is what it was. I'm not sure. But we'll keep rolling. We're going to check out some really cool ads. And then we're going to get into trivia and new videos coming up. But let's see. Starting off with AC Delco ad, AC Spark Plug $. Buy 7, get 1 free. Another ad that really stood out to me, and obviously you guys will know why. Obviously, if you've been hanging out with me a while, you know why. I really like this ad. I know Rico's going to like it because Rico got him a new pickup this weekend as well. He sent me a couple pictures of it. Ford introduces the trickiest trucks in town. Custom paint, custom looks on brand new Ford pickups. That was kind of cool to see a manufacturer actually promoting some of their custom packages. This next one was kind of cool. A little bit of a performance, kind of a performance-minded thing, but more of a styling thing, I guess. ET Mags. ET Mag wheels had a big contest going on. Pretty cool to see that. Let's see. Great looking Z28 ad for the new Camaro Z28. Nice action shot. Good color on that one. 79 Tasman. He remembers ET Mags. Yeah, there again. It's hindsight, but it's cool to go back and see that stuff. Big Daddy Garlett says NRI can train you at home to be a professional auto mechanic. You could actually order your own study materials, and and they had Big Daddy for a spokesman to turn you into a tech. I guess prior to online school, it was mail school. So, let's see, what else do we got here? Oh, obviously, Richard Petty article. Got to have a really cool STP motor oil ad. They put the STP can on top of a connecting rod to make it look like the piston, make it stand out. Great colors. Obviously, a bunch of Richard Petty in here. You got to have a cool STP ad. Old School was born in 79. So was 79 Tasman. So magazine's a little bit older than even you guys are. Let's see. What else we got here? This is a small ad. I'll kind of get it held up to where you can see it. It's kind of cool. To get what you need to run Mopar, read the new Direct Connection catalog. You can order your own catalog to get your direct connection parts from Mopar. Even though that's a small ad, not a lot of color in it, still kind of cool to see that today. Something else that was really, really coming out and obviously getting extremely popular at that time. There's a couple of ads in here that we're going to get to that is really great. A roof is just a roof until it's hatched. Hurst hatched. Hurst T-top convert T-top roofs. Obviously, got huge in the late 70s and well into the 80s. And it was really cool to see you had all these cars down here they were available for. Obviously the Firebird, the 73 to 77, all the A-body GMs from 73 to 77s, as well as Firebirds and Camaros. So that was pretty cool. What was it before Direct Connection? I don't remember what they actually branded the performance division at prior to that. Obviously, the Ram Chargers were involved with it heavily, but I don't think that's what they actually called the performance parts division. I think that was just the performance stuff. Another cool ad was for the Mustang 2, once again showing off T-tops on the Ford Mustang 2. So that was kind of cool too. Obviously a big thing in that area, in that time frame. We'll catch a couple of more ads here, and then we're going to move on. So I know we've been running a little while tonight. I know you guys got other stuff to do. I appreciate you sticking in here and hanging out with me. This is a great color ad. Once again, custom wheels, and these are another iconic wheel, the Keystone Classic. Isobo Regal. So they're definitely cool and a period thing. And like I said, my 78 Turbo Regal has them on there. It's had them on there since I bought it in the late 80s. I actually bought Grand National wheels for that car years ago. I don't think I want to put the Grand National wheels on it. I think I want to leave the Keystones on it just because that's what it's always had. And you see this ad from 77 right before those cars were coming out. It almost kind of wants to make me leave them on there even more. One more ad, and then we're going to move on. But once again, the reason I want to sneak this one in was, once again, T-tops. The American Hatch Beauty Treatment from the American Hatch Corporation. I mean, if we all know that's when these things became really popular. That's when T-tops, sunroofs really started coming into play. Didn't realize it was such a big deal that all these companies were literally running all these ads, strictly marketing these conversions at that point. Now, obviously, we know, shortly after that, they started becoming factory, mid-78. Firebirds and Camaros got factory T-tops. But this was a big deal at the time. So really cool to see these ads directly targeted towards that. 79 Tasman says it's called Hustle Stuff. I never heard that. I don't ever recall hearing that. That's cool to know that Mopar called their stuff Hustle Stuff. That's new to me. So anyway, that wraps up the magazine for tonight. We'll get into some trivia. We'll go through everybody that I've got in for the raffle. And then we'll get ready to call it an evening. But tonight's trivia question, We've got another mobile gloss can. We've given away a few of these in the past. I had several of these in a big collection of mobile stuff I bought. Tonight's winner is going to get this mobile gloss can. We'll get it fired out to them. If you're the winner, just give me a shout after we get done and give me your address, and I'll get that sent to you. Yeah, that's right. Convertibles were pretty much over at that point, Jim, like Jim says, and so that was basically kind of about what it amounted to. Was going with T-tops and sunroofs. But the trivia question for tonight, if you caught the video with our new friend Doug Prey, thanks, James. Appreciate that. Glad you're here with us. Glad you're enjoying it. He talked about, I think this was in the first video, he talked about a legendary, since we're on designers tonight, a legendary designer who was very good friends with his dad, Glenn Prey, and even talked about when that designer was in town visiting his dad, Doug said, he goes, hey, he had to sleep on the couch because the designer got his room. So very close family friends. But who was that designer? And I'm not going to, as long as the spelling is close and I can make out who it is, because the one name's kind of tricky. But I'll keep an eye out for that designer's name, and whoever wins going to get the mobile gloss can for tonight. So keep an eye on both formats. Whatever answer I see first is what we've got to go with, because we sometimes run into system feed issues. So watching for the name of that designer. We're going to get into the trivia, or to the raffle that we've got coming up for next week on the badges. We've got the pictures posted up there for everybody to see. We're going to give the next Sunday night, we're going to give those away. And I'm going to ship I think there's 7 of them in that collection, to the winner next week. Remember, it's $1 a chance. You send me $1, your name goes into the big Buick can. One time you send me 10, your name's in the big Buick can. 10 times you send me 20, your name's in the big Buick can. 20 times. We've already got a pretty good start for next week's drawing. Lots of those names in there. Get all these stuff back in the can, including the ones I dropped, so we can ship these to somebody next week. The Plymouth badge, the Oldsmobile badge, the Dodge Brothers badge, the Chevrolet badge, the Buick badge, the Ford badge, and the Triple Diamond International. Next Sunday night, we're going to draw for these. The winner's going to get all of them. If you haven't got your chances in, be sure to either PayPal me, or if you're going to mail it to me, get them in the mail first thing tomorrow. If I don't have them by next Sunday, they will have to go in the following month's drawing. Next Sunday night, we're going to give these away, and we will announce the new raffle for April. No winners as of yet. I figured that one was going to be a little tricky because you had to be paying attention to the video. We'll let it go till the end of the episode tonight and see if we get a winner. If not, I will tell you at the end when we sign off, and we'll save the mobile gloss can for next week. Who's in for this month's raffle? If I do not read your name, I have not gotten your payment. 79 Tasman says Lee Iacocca. No, that's not correct, but it was a good guess at least. I knew this one was a little tricky, so I'll keep an eye out for it. But if you have Dallas Winslow, nope, that was not the designer. So I'm keeping an eye out. I'll keep an eye on both formats as we start going through the names. If you sent me money either in the mail or on PayPal for the raffle, and I do not read your name off, I have not gotten it. It is not in the can, and you need to contact me, so make sure we get on the same page. Scott Andrews, Chris Powers, Jason Withrow, Jess Cotter, Lance Smith, George Collada, Terry Hewlett. There we go. Jason got it. Gordon Burig. Jason's our winner tonight. Gordon Burig was the designer that was actually good friends with Glenn Prey. And not only that, he also designed, but he did design the Auburn Boattail Speedster. Not for 1935. He designed what is the iconic car that is commonly known as the coffin nose cord, the 36, 37, 810, 812 cord, as well as had a very, very successful career with Ford. Very interesting story. And if you like that stuff, be sure to stick with us. Tuesday night for Toy Tuesday, I've got an iconic Gordon Buick piece that we're going to look at on Toy Tuesday evening. So Jason's our winner tonight. And no, Mike, you're not right. So, I'll get this can saved for you. Robert's on. Glad you made it. 79 Tasman said must have had to look it up. Maybe he did. I don't know, but that's why I kind of left it a little bit open-ended. It's a very, very iconic designer. And like I said, I got a super, super cool piece that we're going to look at Tuesday night. That's definitely that's related directly to Gordon Buick and design, since we've kind of been on designers. Thanks, Mick. I appreciate the kind words. Glad you made it for a while, even though you've got to sign off. I'm glad you made it for a little while tonight. Lee Carr is in the badge raffle. Seth Russell and Greg Myers. So if I did not read your names in this packet, your name is not in the can. So if you had paid me, then you need to let me know if I didn't read your name off, because I don't have you in here for the raffle. So that's what we've got there. Next week, we're going to give those away and announce the new raffle for April. New inventory. I didn't pick anything up this week. It rained most of the week up until when we had to leave for Kansas City. So I didn't pick anything up this week, but it's starting to dry out. I actually have to get some stuff picked up. I've been buying too many cars. I've got to get some stuff hauled in this week. New videos for this week is going to be, I'll have some new inventory on the 66 Riviera. I did a live on location on when we picked it up a few weeks ago. John just jumped on with us on Facebook. Glad you made it, John. Then Old School just got it too. So, but we already had it with Jason Old School, so we missed you there. I dug all the parts out of the 66 Riviera, laid it all out. I mean, obviously no way to look at every single thing, but that car's pretty much all there. A lot of cool stuff there to check out with that 66 Riv. I got a video coming up on a 69 F100 Ford pickup that actually isn't technically new inventory because I bought it two or 3 years ago. But when I bought it, I picked it up late in the day and he had to get it unloaded. I found a hole in the back corner of the yard. I shoved it off and kind of forgot about it. So got that truck moved up front, cleaned it up a little bit. Got a cool video on it. Pretty good old pickup. Somebody's looking for something like that for a project, or it's got a ton of good parts on it. So video coming up on that. We'll have another video from the Auburn Cord Duesenberg factory with Doug Prey. I got the video up Friday night, but it was pretty late on YouTube. So if you missed that, you might want to go back and check that out. Half-ass Rat Rods just got on with us. Glad you made it tonight. So we'll have some more from the Auburn Cord Duesenberg factory and some cool stuff they've got going on. 79 Tasman, do you keep complete cars as project cars, or do you sell parts from them? Typically, if I've got something that's a good complete project, I'll let it sit around for sometimes a year or two. If I can't get any players on them, eventually I will part them out. I do try to keep a lot of stuff around intact. But there again, it's also comes down to dollars too. It takes a lot of dollars to make this machine work and to, pay property tax, to pay dealer licenses, to pay insurance, to buy bonds, all the stuff to be a legal dealer, and to continue to buy inventory, to continue to replenish inventory. So if I've got something that's complete, I will put it out there for sale. I am a licensed used vehicle dealer as well as a salvage dealer, so I can sell anything from a door handle to a complete vehicle legally in the state of Kansas. But at some point, if nobody's biting on the whole vehicle, eventually a lot of times I do end up taking them apart just for that reason. They still have to make money no matter how it has to be done. So if it sits around long enough and I don't get a bite on them, a lot of times that does happen. So I do a little bit of both, I guess, is the only way to answer that. So glad Glenn, thanks a lot. I'm glad you made it. And glad it's the highlight of your week, or high point of your week. That's pretty amazing. But that's something pretty cool that is there's just always cool stuff going on. But that's kind of how I do it on complete stuff versus part stuff and things like that. So that's about what I've got for tonight. Stay tuned. Like I said, more cool stuff coming. We'll have more from the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Company. How far do I travel to find cars or trucks? Typically not very far. I don't have time to pick up the stuff I've got bought right now, so I don't have time to go extremely far. Sometimes I'll go 2 or 3 hours, but that's about the extent of it. Do I advertise project cars? Absolutely. I've got a lot of videos on YouTube of complete project cars. So yeah, I do whatever. Sometimes I'll put them on eBay, but it's, at $25 a whack just to list cars. You can't throw a ton of them. And in fact, once you're a high volume dealer, once you put 6 vehicles on in a year, it goes to like $50 a whack to put them on eBay. So I don't put much of it on eBay, but I definitely put them on Facebook and YouTube. And I have, if any of you guys have seen my Craigslist ads, I also have a section in my Craigslist ad that lists vehicles that could still potentially be good projects. So how titles work as far as what I do, since I am a licensed dealer, it is a clean, regular Kansas title. Now, the only difference is if it is, and I do sell some complete running driving cars as well, just like a lot of you have seen the video on the 92 Caprice I just got in. I got to get the dent fixed in the fender, get it cleaned up, buffed out before it's ready to sell. So stuff like that's a perfectly normal title, just like it comes from a dealer. If you buy a vehicle from me, as of right now, the way the laws read in Kansas, if it is a in-op vehicle, one of these old project cars, not running, driving, taillights, headlights, it is a normal Kansas title with the exception it says it is off-road because it is not legal to be driven on the highway at this point. But they are good, clean Kansas titles, just like you bought it off a used car lot. And yeah, old school licensed as opposed to unlicensed. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but in Kansas especially, there are a ton, and I mean a ton, of unlicensed dealers in Kansas flipping cars. There's stuff all over Craigslist, all over eBay by these guys who are not a licensed dealer. And if you buy something from those guys, if the state pops them on anything, I've even talked to guys at the Kansas Department of Revenue who are talking about possible revocation of titles. If they catch these guys flipping vehicles who are not a licensed dealer, and it is happening constantly, that the Department of Revenue come in and says, if we decide they obtain their titles fraudulently, we're going to revoke the titles. So that's actually, potentially a pretty big deal, making sure you are dealing with a licensed dealer, at least if you're dealing with somebody in Kansas because of the Kansas laws. There again, it's going to vary state to state, but in Kansas, there's a huge difference between licensed and unlicensed dealers, and that's because it's gotten abused. In Kansas, if it's an antique vehicle, you can get a new title on a bill of sale with a VIN inspection. What that has done is it has made a whole bunch of people, classic car dealers, flipping projects with no dealer's license. And there's a bunch of them, and they're all over Facebook, and they're all over YouTube, and they're all over Craigslist, and they're all over eBay. So why do you have to be licensed to sell old vehicles in Kansas? If you sell 4 cars, you are a dealer. You can sell 3 cars on your own privately in a year's time. Once you sell your 4th vehicle, the state of Kansas recognizes you as a dealer. So because of that, and because I have 2 licenses, I have a salvage license to part out vehicles and dismantle, and I have a used vehicle license to sell complete vehicles, which means I have to have an insurance policy that covers both of them. I have to buy 2 bonds because I have two separate licenses. I have to buy 2 separate licenses to cover all that. But on the other hand, I don't want the state showing up at my door saying, "What are you doing here?" And with 1,400 cars on 20 acres and 6 buildings full of cars and parts, it's 20,000 square foot under roof. I don't think a dumb look and telling the Department of Revenue nothing is going to get me by. So, but that's what's happening in the state of Kansas. So you see, and obviously there's a lot of old trucks in Kansas. We don't have a ton of rust. So that's where we're seeing a lot of that happening. So just something to think about. If you're looking at a vehicle in Kansas and it's not a licensed dealer, that's just stuff to keep in mind. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Glenn, you made it back. Glenn, lots of stuff popping up on YouTube. We'll try to get through these comments and then we'll get ready to wrap up. Don, glad you made it. Thanks for the comments. Ironhead just got on. He had high winds. And that's right with both half-ass hot rat rods and 79 Tasman. It does. It's expensive. It costs me between taxes and licenses and bonds just to let this stuff sit here. If I don't sell one part, and I own everything, I don't have a payment to the bank or anything, just to let this stuff sit here. If I do nothing, it's about $800 a month, and I'm not even open to the public. Just to let it sit there, it's about $800 a month and all that stuff. So all that stuff is stuff that there again has to be taken into consideration with what I do. But on the other hand, if the Department of Revenue shows up, if the troopers show up to do VINs, if anybody shows up at my door, I can hand them my license and say, no, I'm legal. But there's way more people in Kansas flipping vehicles that you see on eBay and Craigslist and Facebook and YouTube that are not licensed dealers, just because you can get around the laws. But now that it's gotten to this point and there's that many people doing it, there again, Kansas is wising up to it and starting to shut a lot of that down. So I'll keep an eye on comments for a few more minutes. Had some wind today, so I apologize. The videos that are going to be coming out on the Riviera and the F100 are going to have a little wind noise. Even my fuzzy cat on the microphone couldn't calm it down today. But when I looked at the forecast, the next 2 or 3 days are supposed to be way windier than it was today, so I went ahead and shot them. So we're going to have a little bit of wind noise, but I live in Kansas. So other than picking everything up and moving it somewhere else, we're going to get some wind noise from time to time here. So as always, I super appreciate you guys swinging by tonight. I still am amazed that you guys come by and hang out with me every Sunday night. We've got a great group. That's right, Glenn. It adds up. It's expensive to do it. It's expensive to do it right. If I wanted to try to get around the system and not worry about being licensed, not worry about being insured, not having my bonds in place. But on the other hand, when somebody calls me, even a lot of you guys from halfway across the country or halfway across the world, I can tell you that. You can look me up with the Kansas Secretary of State. I am legal, licensed, bonded. I am registered with the state. And for me to do what I do, that way you guys know who you're dealing with as well, as opposed to a lot of these guys who are not legal. So, there's value to it to be legitimate and be legal, but it's still expensive. It's expensive to do it. And that's what it takes. Lots of crazy weather. Nashville has floods. Alabama's been tornadoes. It's been a wild weekend. Fortunately, we haven't had any of that here. So I guess the little wind I had to deal with today, I'll deal with, though that's still not terribly bad. But that's what we've got. So as always, I'm keeping an eye on comments. We'll get ready to wrap up. Still amazed that you guys come by and hang out. You guys are the ones that really make this something. The comments, the interaction, all of you guys, it's great, and that's what makes this thing work, and that's what makes it happen. It sure isn't me sitting here in a chair talking in front of a couple of webcams. It's all you guys and your interaction, and I'm glad we have fun doing it. As always, if you've got suggestions, you want to see something different, we're running even longer tonight than I think we've ever run, but that's because of all the participation from you guys, and that's what's so awesome. And sometimes we get a little off topic, but that's because you guys have such great ideas and we talk about them. If you have some ideas and you want to send them to me or call me, let me know what you're thinking. I'll see if I can do some research on it. If you've got some information you want to send to me, more than happy to include it. This is about all of us. It sure isn't about me sitting in front of a couple of webcams. This is about us sharing our knowledge and hanging out as a group, and it's turned into an awesome group, and it continues to grow. I see new names on here every time. And so I mean, which means that you guys are telling your friends about them, and we're going to and hopefully continue to grow and continue to have fun. So as always, thanks for the kind comments from Half-Ass Rat Rods. Tim L., thanks for the kind comments. Some stuff on Facebook as well. And like I said, it's you guys that make this happen. I appreciate your support. I don't always see all the comments. between all of the platforms that I'm involved with on Facebook and YouTube, between all the channels and pages that I help manage. But I do occasionally see them, and I do appreciate them. And your kind words is what makes it worthwhile. Glenn says he actually leaves work early to make sure he gets on with us. Great. Joe, see you next week. Same with you. Same to you. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks for the support. We'll see what we can come up with for next week. Be sure to jump on with us Toy Tuesday for a super, super cool Gordon Buick piece. And like I said, more cool videos coming up this week. As always, got any questions about vehicles, parts, whatever, just give me a call. Numbers on the page. Get your chances in for the raffle. Going to give these badges away next Sunday and announce the new raffle. So stay tuned. Got a big Sunday planned next week. Going to give away a can. Going to give away some badges. Hope to see you then. And have a great week, everybody. Check out the videos, and we will give some cool stuff away next week. Thanks for stopping by tonight. Thanks for hanging out. Had a great time with all of you, and we will do it again next Sunday, same time, same station, at 7 o'clock Sunday night Central Time. Thanks for watching, everybody.